Today, we are going to talk about auditory processing disorder. Auditory processing disorder is a neurological deficit in which an individual has difficulty with being able to understand, comprehend, and remember information that was heard. We want to note that it is a disconnect between what is heard and how it is processed. It is not a hearing loss. The auditory nerve lets us hear by connecting the inner ear to the brain, and processing input from the sensory organs transforms physical stimuli into electrochemical signals. The disorder is a condition in the brain causing difficulties comprehending or processing information. In the image on the right, you can see how sound is processed. Sounds enter the ear, tiny middle ear bones amplify the sound. The cochlea sorts sounds by frequency. Nerve passes signal from the cochlea to the brainstem. Signal then travels through the brain, getting decoded along the way. Lastly, the auditory cortex recognizes and processes the sound. Auditory processing disorder occurs in approximately 5% of school-aged children. 43% of children with a learning disability also have auditory processing disorder. 50% of children with ADHD and 70% of children with dyslexia also have coexisting auditory processing disorder. There are 5 types of auditory processing disorder. Auditory discrimination difficulty means that the child does not have the ability to distinguish different sounds. Auditory figure ground discrimination difficulty means that the child lacks the ability to focus on certain sounds in a noisy setting. An example of this would be a child being able to recognize their parent's voice at a playground or park. Auditory memory difficulty is when the child is unable to recall what they have heard. An example of this would be if I were to say my name to the child and have them repeat it back. They would not be able to repeat my name back. Auditory sequencing difficulty is when the child lacks the ability to comprehend and recall sounds and words. Lastly, auditory attention difficulty is when the child is unable to stay focused enough to complete a task. Causes of auditory processing disorder are unknown. Evidence suggests links to head trauma, lead poisoning, and chronic ear infections.
In a normal individual, if the statement, "the boy jumps the fence," is verbalized, the auditory cortex of the brain correctly processes the sound and the person comprehends the statement, "the boy jumps the fence." However, with CAPD, something prevents the accurate processing of the verbal statement made even though the ear properly hears the sound. The boy jumps the fence. The boy jumps the fence. The boy jumps the fence. Often, someone with CAPD will hear a wide range of different words and/or add in extra letters from what was actually spoken. With such alterations, it changes the entire meaning and understanding of the spoken sentence.
Children with auditory processing disorder can have one or more of the following symptoms: difficulty following spoken or multi-step directions, needing constant repetition of what was said, easily distracted by surrounding noises, trouble processing and interpreting sounds, difficulty following conversations, lack of musical ability, inability to learn and remember songs, and difficulty with remembering details of what was said or heard.
The primary occupations impacted are education, work, and social participation. This would be with tasks like attending to and understanding instructions and communicating with coworkers, family, friends, and peers. APD primarily affects processing skills like attending, noticing, and responding, and then it has secondary social interaction skills that are affected like questioning, replying, transitioning, timing responses, and then also due to discrimination difficulties, they would have trouble with turning towards sounds and voices and looking towards sounds and voices. As far as treatments for APD, There are currently no medical cures or treatment, but there are several therapeutic strategies that can be carried out through occupational and speech therapy. These are things like reducing background noise, having the child look at the person while they're speaking, using descriptive sentences, speaking slightly slower and louder than usual, getting the child to repeat the instructions back to you, and maintaining organization of classwork and instructions, having them sit at the front of the classroom, using listening aids and assistive technologies like tablets for notes or audio recorders, and then visual aids, augmentative communication devices, and sign language. Precautions relate to noisy environments, speaking too fast, not making eye contact, and especially with the safety component of making sure that they're not in environments that are dangerous if they cannot discriminate where sound is coming from. For example, like a busy street. Finally, here is the list of our references for all of the resources we used while researching auditory processing disorder. Thank you for listening.